This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Benefits Buzz. We're so glad you joined us. We have a really important topic for today's episode. I'm extremely excited to dive into it. You may or may not know, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And it was really important to Kelsey and I that we do an episode on mental health. We had tens of millions of employees that went from to in the office to work remote. And I think what we saw and what we experienced, even me personally, is some mental health issues in terms of dealing with the new environment, kids, work productivity. The list goes on. And I'm so excited to dive into this. Kelsey, welcome as well. My co-host, Kelsey Burgad. This is going to be a really, I think, educational episode for all of our listeners for sure.
I definitely agree. And I think one of the unique things about what we all experienced in the last year is we all across the entire globe experienced that at the same time. So that makes it even more heightened, trying to seek help for the mental health issues that, we have going on in the world today. So I'm really excited to have our guests. For sure. I love that. It's absolutely a great point. And we all experience it in a very different way, in our own unique way, I will. And so we're all living with some version of this and how we cope with it. And I can't wait to dive into all this. I want to hear about, what is America experiencing? What can HR pros and employers do to make sure their employees are taken care of and have the resources in front of them? So with that, I can't wait to introduce our two guests today. We have Trevor Wilkerson. He is the manager of clinical EAP services at Beacon Health Options. And we have one of our very own, a WEXer. Kate Levesque is the global benefits manager here at WEX. Trevor, Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I can't wait to dive into this. This is going to be such a good conversation. And selfishly, I'm going to learn so much, I know, during this dialogue with you as an employee, as for myself, to help others, for everything. So I can't wait to dive in. So maybe we'll start by just kind of looking at, let's look at the landscape, if you will. I mean, obviously, we know everyone was thrown into situations we were uncomfortable with. Our whole lives were disrupted. And now we're kind of getting to a point where maybe we may be going back for some of us. And that brings on a whole new layer of complexities and potentially anxiety. So let's start with a question of, what are we seeing? Are you seeing a heightened concern when it comes to mental health issues, whether it's regarding the pandemic or not? I just love to kind of get maybe your gut check or pulse check on where we sit as a nation.
That's a great question, Eric. And I think it's interesting. You say a gut check, right? And I think all of us have that sense that there's something brewing, that people are having a harder time. And, we're just now starting to see some of that data roll out, and it's validating that, right? Okay. Like we're seeing pretty significant increases in depression and anxiety specifically, and people kind of reporting an increase in those symptoms recently compared to, this time last year or the year before. So.
Yeah, and I would agree, Trevor, just to piggyback on that. We obviously engaged heavily, as I'm sure others joining this call, but into our EAP program, but we've also seen just increase from our medical standpoint when it comes to those claims coming through, as well as from a disability perspective. So it definitely kind of it's good when it all aligns. And then I think it is really our focus from an HR perspective and overseeing global benefits. It's tying into, the Beacon, the EAP services, and really being able to shift on a dime as we've kind of navigated the different waters. So is a focus, I think. However, with the pandemic and some of the obstacles it's presented us, we just had to navigate and really align with our philosophy with the employee and their family at the center has been our main focus.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we all maybe know or suspect that there's been an increase in mental health issues over the last year or year and a half now at this point. But I'm curious, Trevor, is there a difference between, the people who have been work from home or went work from home versus those who, maybe throughout this entire pandemic, they work at grocery stores or they're, essential workers, hospital workers, where they're not working from home every day? Is there a difference or are we seeing any trends between the two when it comes to mental health issues?
That one's been, I think, a little, tough to gauge, and it's changed over time, right? So initially there was that disruption, and everybody was kind of fast and everybody had to move home. But we've seen people get kind of comfortable with that, and actually find some positives. I'm glad you brought up, some of our frontline workers, and I think that's where we're seeing a lot of, people who are needing a lot more support. They haven't had that luxury to be in a safe place, so they're faced with those things every day. And our hospital workers are, just the things that they're seeing, and the tireless work they put in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up, the shift that's maybe now taking place. And I think Eric touched on it earlier, but, now we're to the point where companies like WEX are starting to talk about going back to work. And so we disrupted ourselves, and we went work from home. And now, we all got comfy cozy in our houses with our pets and with our family potentially. I mean, maybe with our family. I don't know if we ever got comfy with our little ones running in the back of our calls. But, now we're talking about disrupting ourselves again. And it's like, ooh, now we're going back to the office. And I don't even know if I fully processed what it's going to be like to have a set schedule again in the morning where you get up and you take your kid to daycare and then you have to be in the office at a certain time and the commute life again. So, have we seen an uptick of people now reaching out for those types of concerns that they have where, am I going to be required to have a mandatory vaccination or I have to leave my dog or, those types of things?
Kate, I don't know if you want to touch on that, maybe from a benefits perspective and what you've seen. It's hard to say if we're seeing more calls related to that, but it's interesting. I was looking at something recently, and it was a survey that showed something like 30 to 40% of employees said they would look for other work if they had to go back full time.
Wow.
And
it's surprising, but not surprising, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's super powerful. And I do think that is what we've seen. So I think like most companies, and, I've done a lot of networking, I think companies aren't making these decisions in silos. Like they are looking at, industry, they are taking employee pulse surveys, similar to what WEX has done. I do think, shifting when we were all hearing all about COVID and shifting kind of to the work from home, WEX did a really good job, I would say, from the IT infrastructure with our customer service folks doing virtual ergo support, setting up, for those essential workers, screenings in place in partnership with a medical provider, doing kind of our monthly COVID newsletters and employee newsletters. And so I think employees had a lot of support and continue to have a lot of support. And that I think just goes to WEX's culture and our philosophy with really supporting our employees no matter what is going on. So right now it's, with COVID, but it could be a natural disaster at a certain state and we've got to, engage there. But what we are seeing is now through I think we've done 4 employee surveys on kind of the reentry to work. And it is, it's shifting our culture, which is, I think, an exciting thing, right? And so we've been super successful. And now we have to support those employees as we do engage back to what does the new reentry to work look like. And there is no silver, like, this is what it's going to be. But I think it is, to your point, Kelsey, it's, people have been home with their pets and they've set up their homework stations and they're being super successful and they've rearranged the routines. And I think we've got a culture of change and employees can adapt pretty quickly. But we also, I think the way we work going forward is going to adjust. And I think for really, it's going to pan out really well for us. And we are taking the voice of the employee into a lot of those considerations, which I'm sure a lot of companies are doing by, doing focus group sessions or, obviously surveys and really building out what does that reentry to work, look like.
Right, right. No, I think that's great. And I would agree, right? There's just tons of focus, and I think about WEX and the communication and the support. And I know everyone listening is thinking about the things that they had to do. And remember when we did, even before we jumped live on this podcast, we were talking prior. And I remember thinking, like, someone brought up like this whole concept of there's this huge adrenaline rush when we had to work from home. Life was changing. And again, back to Kelsey's point, we all went through some type of mental health adjustment, figuring out our lives. And it didn't even dawn on me because I was so hungry to go back to, air quotes here, normal, that I wasn't even thinking about the anxiety and how life will be disrupted again now that I've gotten acclimated to a way of life. For a lot of those listeners are now going back. And what does that come with? Again, is it pet separation anxiety? Is it like, oh, I'm around in person in meetings? Or what if I don't want to go? I've gotten really comfortable here. And that just creates this multitude of issues. And I think, because we all went through this in some shape or form, are you seeing that people are just, are you seeing more recognized mental health, issues in themselves, or are you seeing that it's a bit more of a common discussion point than perhaps it was in the past, now that we've all lived through it in some shape or form?
Oh, I would say yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And it struck me even very early on. One of my last times being in the office, one of my last times listening to the news in my car, right? They're already talking about companies and employers like increasing their EAP benefit, offering more counseling.
Exactly.
Like right away, the response was so immediate. And now I feel like you hear it in the news more. And so it's just that collective consciousness. We're talking about it like it's more of a normal thing. I think we have some work to do still, but being able to talk about it the same way we would talk about heart disease or a broken bone, right?
Yeah.
I think we're getting closer to that, and it's pretty exciting.
I think you bring up a really good point, Trevor, because sorry. It's okay. I have my coworkers here. So I think, Trevor, you bring up a really good point, because I think EAP services in general, just EAP, services in general we've always had them, and companies have always had them in place. However, I think the beauty of this is that now they're getting the engagement that they truly deserve, and why companies have put them in place. So I think like that's been a really successful thing. I think we've seen it, obviously Beacon's here, but with our telehealth option as well, whether that's behavioral telehealth or it is kind of the virtual doctor. And so just for WEX alone, we actually had our Cigna utilization meeting, and our telehealth has always been used, but I would say like 1% or 2%, like very low. And we haven't done anything magical as far as communicating it or promoting it. I think it was just the elements of the environment. So employees didn't feel comfortable. And so they engaged in the telehealth, and our utilization went over 8,000%. That is 8,000, which is phenomenal. And yes, we did obviously do a lot of communication, and we, along all of our pillars. But the telehealth became a huge success for us along, and I think that parallels to our EAP utilization. So,
and I think it's, that's not going anywhere. I think that's going to be one of the benefits here is, and mental health clinicians didn't go into mental health because they were good with technology. And it's pushed people out of their comfort zone, and clinicians and practitioners out of their comfort zone. And so now they have that skill and that capability. They've learned how to do it. And so that availability, particularly in rural areas, will continue to be there. So that's great.
I mean, it's a whole new level of growth, right? For everybody, because, when you get uncomfortable in a certain situation, you really grow. And I think that's one of the best things that's come out of this pandemic is just people talking about it more, like you said, being more aware of it, being more willing to go ask somebody for help. I want to dig a level deeper and talk about what are some of the symptoms that people should be aware of or watching in each other or themselves or their spouses to help bring light even more onto this topic.
Yeah, I like that. And what's our role, like as a coworker, right? I love that, Kelsey. Like, and what do we do if we see those things? Like, what should we be looking for? And then
Exactly.
what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm not a clinician like you are. Like, I don't know. How do I deal with this? I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, that's, I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, and it's interesting, being a coworker too, like you're trying to figure out what's your place, what's that professional boundary, right? So you have that going on. In terms of what to look for, and it's a little harder, like being remote. So things are not quite as obvious, but just looking for those changes, things that are different. I think you can see it in people. I mean, absenteeism is a really common one. Just noticing that they're not speaking up as much in meetings, but not meeting deadlines. Those subtle changes that you might see. Really, I would say, trust your gut. I think something's not right here, and it's fine to say. There's no harm in saying, "Are you okay?" There's no hurt there. And really, in terms of your role, right? You're right. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with that. They're afraid if they ask the question, "Oh no, what do I do now?" And you don't need to know a lot, right? I think just focus on being there as a listener, right? And having a little bit of knowledge, right? Like knowing about the EAP and being able to talk to people about that, and then being able to like check back in with people and say, "How are you doing? Did you ever call the EAP? How did that go?" I think goes a long way. When people feel connected, they do better, and that's a great way to help somebody out. It's just give them that little bit of connection that they may be missing.
Right.
Yeah, Trevor, I think those are all really, good points. And I think that has been some of the questions coming in from managers, as well as employees of, just what are things that they could be looking for? How do they support? Because it is always in the lens of how do they support, or how do we get them to the best resource? And so we've done, like for us, a lot of like manager trainings. We've done employee trainings, some quick sheets of, again, if you're in a conversation and, you ask those questions, or, how are you feeling? And are you okay? And, just kind of sharing that dialogue. But if there is like further support, just knowing the number. So you don't need to know a lot of the employee assistance program, but it's just like, what is the number to get the employee to? And I think, self-care for our managers is one of the things that we, focus on as well, because you're worrying about your team, but you also need to kind of like worry about yourself and make sure that the number, and the services and support. And, we do promote a lot of, because people are sitting at their desk. So you don't have those like water cooler chats, and you don't have the bathroom breaks, but it's going and walk to your, mailbox, or, step out, away from your desk and do some 2-minute mindful meditation. It's, stretching can go a really long way. But really it's the importance of taking breaks. I think, Trevor, you hit it spot on with, connections. So, whether it's being a part of an ERG group, reaching out to your mentor, having daily connects with your team. I think all of those things are really important in thriving in kind of a virtual world. And I think that is the shift that most companies are going to. It may not be fully remote, but some sort of hybrid, and how that, works successfully for you, and having that open dialogue with your manager or the HR peer that you feel comfortable with, I think is important.
Sometimes I think, people can just be really prideful and not want to seek help, right? Like, I can handle this on my own, or there's some silly stigma around reaching out to an EAP or to anyone, right? And I think, I'm not saying everyone has it, but I even feel that in myself. I'm like, oh, I'll figure this out. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, there's some vulnerability that people are afraid of, especially in a work environment, right? Where it might be hard to go an HR professional to your HR person and be like, hey, I'm struggling. Is there any suggestions that you have, or have you seen people, maybe that barrier removed and that stigma disappear? Or do you have suggestions for HR professionals to help remove that feeling and make them feel comfortable about the resources they have and that it is okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. One in terms of how to, it's how you talk about it with employees, right? And understanding too, EAP is a lot more than just counseling. And so people may come with things that are, like financial problems, housing problems, childcare concerns, right? That's been a big one this year. And knowing that maybe that's kind of an inroad into EAP, when you can say, oh, you need help finding childcare, EAP can help. Well, now they're aware of us, right? And so like for us, for instance, when someone calls us, we always take that opportunity to talk about the other things we can provide. And it's amazing when somebody will call, for financial reasons, maybe they are in danger of foreclosure or something like that. And that's our chance for us to say, hey, this can be really stressful. Can I talk to you about some of the other things we can do? It might be helpful to talk to somebody, right? And I think knowing that you don't have to have like a significant or a serious problem to benefit just from talking to somebody, right? Like, what's the harm, right? There's no cost, right? Like in EAP, there's no diagnosis.
Right.
So really you can talk about anything, right? So, and I think that's...
what I love about that is, I think one thing I've learned just in this conversation today is that it doesn't take any great action from, like, if I recognize maybe something in somebody I'm close with, it doesn't take any great action on my end to help them or support them. It's all about, listening and being that person that's going to just be a listening ear. And it's so funny because I've been reading this book to my son every night before I put him to bed. I think it's called The Rabbit Listens or something. It's one of those Dolly Parton imagination library books that they send out. And it's clicking in my mind that we're so focused on teaching our littles, be a listening ear, be kind, be a helpful, supportive person, but we're not really even thinking about how we need to take that action ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking, in my mind, I'm like, wow, that's such a powerful resource for teaching our littles. What are some resources for, helping us recognize it in ourselves or helping other people who we may recognize it in them? So what are some resources that we can share with those HR professionals to share with themselves or their teams?
Yeah, and I think Kelsey and Trevor, both of you kind of like hit it spot on. And I think a lot of what we've done for WEX, and I'm sure, those joining, is just right around communication. I think so. Has been through, and it could be multi-pronged, right? So we've done, I think, in-person sessions, we've done videos, specific like manager trainings, employee trainings. We really do take the pulse of the employees. So what's coming through, we've got a service center that basically is the front line for all employee questions. And so it is monitoring what's coming through there. We leverage, very closely with our HR business partners to understand what are some business challenges, because again, we might need to do something specific based on what a business unit may be going through. And so, just, I think a lot of what the EAP and others, our other providers offer, we could tap into that, but then the beauty of it is that we can also customize it specific to what's going on for our organization, and really helping to your point, Kelsey, I think teach people that, it is good to be kind and be the listening ear. And I think we have to have some kind of like leniency on ourselves. Like, this has been a very challenging year. And I think as, we went from like work from home, from like being in office to work from home, and now potentially have a hybrid approach or whatever kind of the new entry will look like, we have to have some grace with ourselves as well as like those that we work with. Because it's a change in routine. People have change in routines for their pets. They may have parents that are living at home with them. They've got, potentially kids going back to school full time after being in hybrid or fully remote. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff. And I think it is those elements of, for us, it's been just communication has really been our focus.
Yeah, and I would agree. It's been great here. How about Trevor, from your standpoint? I know as an EAP provider, you must have some resources. Is there any, if someone's looking for some additional resources, a way to help their employee base, where should we go? What should they look to?
So there's some real common ones that we kind of recommend a lot. I mean, one is going to NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and that's NAMI.org. SAMHSA.gov, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. So they have a lot of publications, a lot of good information, different blogs, things like that, links to local support groups. I think those are really good, for professionals, people in the field, whether EAP or HR. EPA has a website. That's an international association. So they have a lot of, every week they're coming out with, new articles that they're pulling from sources all over the world. So highly recommend that for anyone wanting more information. And Kate, I just want to mention something you kind of mentioned a couple times, and going back to the study that I mentioned earlier, when they surveyed employees about returning to work, one of the important things that they found was, or when employees were most anxious, is when the company did not get their input. So I think that's fantastic that you all are doing that, and I think that goes a long way. So
yeah, good tip that. And I know that our producer was vigorously writing down all those resources, Trevor, and we'll make sure and put those in our show notes so that when people go and listen to the episode, they can jump to some of those sites. So I love it. Hey, this has been really, really good. And Kate, I had a smile on my face earlier in the show when your little one tried to have a conversation with you. It's just the reality, right, of all the things that we've been dealing with and experiencing, and it kind of seemed on point for what we were talking about. So I want to thank both of you for your resources, for your insight, and for your candidness around this really important topic, and super eye-opening. And I feel like I'm more prepared to, I think, look internally as well as to help others, and some great resources that are available. So thank you so much for your time today, both of you.
Yeah,
thanks for having us. Thanks for having the conversation.
WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.